In our culture, everything is based on success. But what is success? Who defined it? Who decided that success was the goal instead of fulfillment? What happens if we shake up that definition? What if we make our own definition of success? My name is Tony Grebmeyer, and on this podcast, I'm going to dig deep into the real stories behind success. Join me as I interview other entrepreneurs who've climbed up Success Mountain and have come back down to share their stories so you can succeed. If you're ready to join a community of other entrepreneurs redefining success and finding fulfillment, go to BeFulfilledLife.com and join the community. Now, let's dive into today's show. Welcome to Be Fulfilled. It is the real stories behind success. I'll be your host and Sherpa up and down Success Mountain, Tony Grebmeyer. I hope you're ready. Today's guest is just going to be one that's going to be filled with insight and information, pen and paper, definitely something to write with. If you listen to this show long enough, I only bring you the best of the best. And today's guest, he's an expert strategist, a negotiator, a deal maker, over 30 years experience as a successful entrepreneur, an attorney, a consultant, author, and a professional speaker. He's the founder of a leading corporate and deal law firm and the founder of DealQuest, a speaking, training, and consulting company committed to inspiring authenticity in business. Author of an Amazon bestseller. He's also the creator and host of the DealQuest podcast. Make sure you listen, subscribe, and leave a review. Please welcome to the show today, Corey Kupfer.
Tony, it's great to be here. Looking forward to being with you and being with your audience.
Hey, Corey, like I said in the pre-show, it's funny. We probably along life's journey ran into each other and didn't know who each other was. But today I'm honored to see you face to face, talk to you. Same question everybody out the gate gets. What is your definition of success?
Yeah, for me, and it might seem a little cliche, but it's just about happiness and freedom. My highest ideal is freedom, right, in life. And that applies to freedom from oppression for all people around the world, which is one of my commitments, but also freedom to live my life the way I want to live it, right? So for me, that's ultimately success, right? If I could create the life I want, if my day to day and my week to week and my year to year looks like the way I want it, and I could spend it with the people that I want, and I can help the people I want and make the impact I want, that's success.
I love that. Hey, where'd you just grow up? Where was home for you growing up as a kid?
Grew up in Brooklyn, New York, low middle class kid, always food on the table, but paycheck to paycheck. That's my background, Brooklyn kid.
So when you grew up, sports fan? Were you a sports fan growing up?
Absolutely. Mets, not Yankees, Mets, football Giants, which was an unusual combination, thank God, because I at least did one team that won a few. And Knicks, Rangers, typical New York sports fan.
I like it. No, I grew up a Mets fan, to be honest with you. I loved when I was a young kid watching the 86 Mets and just watching life happen. And I can tell you about every player on that team. And if you ask me about any other winning championship team, I probably could name one or two. But with the Mets back in the day, I loved them growing up. I had a huge fan on Sid Fernandez, Kevin Mitchell. When you start looking at all of from the Mookie Wilsons to all the greats that have played there, you couldn't have picked a better team. And now, baseball's fun. Baseball and business kind of go hand in hand. And I talk often with people in my life, like, we got to figure out your batting average. And I got to tell you, man, Jim Rohn talks about it. You bat 3 for 10, you're a multi-millionaire. Well, here's a guy, it looks like you batted well for the last 30 years. You got some amazing experience at the plate, being an entrepreneur, an attorney, a consultant, author, and a professional speaker. Where did this kind of develop from? Where was this kind of passion that you went up to the plate and just started getting on base?
Yeah, it's interesting. And by the way, a little side note, I was at Game 6 when the ball went through Buckner's legs. I was physically there. One of the best experiences of my life. But to answer your question, so it's interesting. I had an entrepreneurial bent from the time I was a kid, and my parents were not entrepreneurs. They worked for somebody for their entire lives, but for whatever reason, I used to deliver flyers door to door in Brooklyn. Like, I'd work for a company, they'd pay me a penny a piece to stuff them in people's screen doors. And you were really happy if you got like 2 flyers, like a supermarket circle and something else, because then you got a penny and a half and you made a lot more money. Well, so I ended up stopping in stores on my route while I was working for somebody else and getting my own accounts and hiring my friends. So I had a business with, let's not call them employees because I was not withholding any taxes. So we'll call them independent contractors. back when I was 15, and ran that for a couple of years. So I always had this entrepreneurial bent. I ran businesses when I was in college. I created stuff, and but I also had these very sort of great but traditional, get educated, get a job parents. That was the only route that they knew. So I went to high school, college, law school, got a job in big law. Did that for a while, but knew that I wouldn't be working for somebody for the rest of my life. And then in about 6 years in, a little less than 6 years in, when I decided I've had enough, I actually took 4 months off, skied in Vermont, because I hadn't taken that trip to Europe or be a ski bum for a year, and I went straight through. Took 4 months off, skied 40 something days up at Killington. And really what I was deciding was, what kind of business do I want to open? Do I want to open a law firm? Because that's what I know, or do I want to open something else? And I decided at that time in a law firm because I realized that 90% of what I hated practicing law was about working for someone else, not about the practice of law. So that's what I started with. And I've done real estate investment system. I have a speaking, training, consulting company. My wife's got 2 companies, so I've really kept that entrepreneurial mindset, which is unusual for a lawyer. And we even the law firm itself is run very entrepreneurially.
I like that. Yeah, it's also something that's hard as an entrepreneur is to switch off your brain and go in a completely different direction. And it sounds like just reading a little bit about you and knowing you from what I've seen, a lot of stuff kind of complements one another, right? It helps lend kind of a nice overview when you're doing it. And along the way, you wrote a book. Talk a little bit about kind of your book that you launched and one of the reasons you put that book out there. What was the goal behind that?
Yeah, so for so many years, negotiation was a huge part of what I did, right? Every day, right? I'm a deal guy. I'm negotiating, whether it's M&A deals, licensing deals, or you name it, strategic alliances. And I noticed that I had a different approach from other people. And I talk about in the book, in the Authentic Negotiating book, about 2 folks I worked for very early in my career, and one of whom I say was a master negotiator. Just was able to stay calm through the storm. I give a great example where, I won't go into the whole detail, but we were up till 2 a.m. on this major leverage buyout, $450 million deal, drug chain back then. And, how he was the only calm one in the room. And then I went on to another law firm with a guy who had the reputation of being a great negotiator, but he was just a pound the table kind of tough guy, which, first of all, I don't believe works in the long run at all, but certainly does not work when you don't have leverage, right? If you have leverage, you can be a tough guy, right? So I had that background, and I've been negotiating for that point when I wrote the book, I don't know, 25, almost 30 years professionally. And I decided, and frankly, my wife said to me at some point, she said, "Corey, you have such mastery in this. You should get that out there, right?" And people were always asking me for advice and all that kind of stuff and whatever. And so I decided that maybe I should write a book. But what I did differently than what some people do is, this is the way I work, same thing I did with my podcast, is I studied the model, right? And some of the things that I found out was that most books sell less than 300 copies. Like 87% of the books sell less than 300 copies. Most people write a book, spend all kinds of time, that have no plan around it, don't know how to leverage it, So I studied the model for a while. And then when I wrote the book, I wrote it with a very clear plan on how I was going to leverage the book to create, some, authority, to use authority marketing, to get it out there, to increase my speaking opportunities. And I knew up front that I'd be selling some books, but I'd also be giving away many books in connection with my speaking and otherwise. And it's been great. It's done exactly what I wanted it to do.
Yeah, no, I think it's super important. And so many people hand out a business card and you just toss it in another stack of business cards. And books can become like that too. But knowing you, seeing your background, understanding the deal making and all those fun things that you get to do, it's not a book most likely going to just be thrown around. It's going to be read and used. And I love it. It's an Amazon bestseller. So thank you for sharing a little bit about that. One of the things I love to do is I came from radio. That's my background. So I was a podcaster, business guy, radio person, and I had this passion to just keep putting out podcasts. And so this is my 3rd show. I love it. Yeah. But one of the things that I love is talking to other podcasters, because it's a market, kind of like being an entrepreneur. You kind of have to know it's a long tail. It's not a short tail. Yes. Very rare do you launch and just see a windfall of numbers. It takes a long time to get there. And it's also something that can get you speaking gigs as well, because your podcast has insight. It tells really quick. You can download and look at your numbers. You can see where you're trending, et cetera. So Let's talk a little bit about your DealQuest podcast. And I love the fact your website, by the way, Corey, drop that URL for everybody when you're talking, but the podcast, I love the format. I love the way that it's laid out. You've got some really amazing marketing around you too. So why don't you share a little bit about your podcast? I want people to download it. If you're listening right now, that means my nudge to you, go like it, subscribe, and leave a review. All reviews help people like you and me to grow our shows, reach new fans, and to really keep putting out content.
100%, Tony. Thank you. So, so the podcast is the DealQuest podcast. So it's on all the players. You can look it up. And my hub website is CoreyKupfer.com, CoreyKupfer.com. You can get to my law firm, click through from the other podcast, the book, all that stuff. The thing with the podcast was it's similar to what I said with the book. I also studied the podcast model, right? Because, there's some stat that the majority of podcasts don't last 15 episodes. Right. And I'm the kind of guy where I either don't do something, or if I do it, I'm doing it. Right. Like I'm doing it full out. I'm never going to be somebody who does 14 episodes and quits. So I'm going to do 0 episodes, or I'm going to do hundreds of episodes. And then maybe, there'll come a time where I do something different, just the way I'm wired. So I studied the model. Now, one of the things that I was clear on when I launched DealQuest is that I wasn't looking to necessarily, listen, obviously the numbers continue to grow and we have a great audience and all that kind of stuff. But I wasn't looking to get 1 million downloads. That was not the purpose of the podcast. It's not a general interest podcast. It's specifically a niche podcast for business owners and executives who are looking to grow inorganically through deals, or they're just frustrated because they have trouble. They're stuck, or they're not growing at the rate they want through organic sales. And you need to have sales and marketing and do all the organic stuff, and you have to do that. It's just that such a smaller percentage of companies take advantage of deal-driven growth. And it's such a huge opportunity. It's not for everybody, but it's for many more companies that are doing it. So that was the purpose of the podcast, is to just get out there and show folks how many different, I don't care what stage of growth you're in. I don't care where you're located. I don't care what industry you're in. There's a deal that you can do. It's not just, you don't need major capital necessarily, although we have people on, I have people on who are venture capitalists, and we talk about funding deals. We talk about big M&A, but we also talk about online affiliate deals and licensing and strategic alliances and business partnerships. So and 20, or 100 other types of deals. So we're trying to blow the misconceptions around deals, that deals are only for certain companies, that you need capital to do them. What it's done is it's gotten a very loyal niche, right, group of listeners, which, by the way, happen to be the perfect folks for my offerings in DealQuest in terms of the consulting and the training, and also on the law firm side, because those are my clients. And at the same time, the thing that people underestimate a lot, and I know you know this, is the guest strategy of having a podcast. It's the ability to build relationships with folks that you may not otherwise be able to get access to, but they want to come on your show because they have a book coming out and they want to promote their company, whatever. And then you get to have build a relationship with them. And I will tell you that the referrals I've gotten of business from guests alone, I can do this podcast for a decade and it would be, it would be worth it already after 2 years.
Yeah. People spend a lot of time thinking, I don't think I'm going to do a podcast. It's just not going to play out. The numbers don't line up. I'm going to invest so much time and money. I'm like, okay, wait. But you're going to throw a bunch of money at YouTube, marketing on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, hoping something sticks. Bet on yourself. That's the thing that I've gambled on every day of my entire life. I bet on myself. And I believe if I stick with something long enough, that's why I'm proud. Like, in all the times that I've had a podcast, it's been since 2015, I've never missed an episode. I've always made sure, like, stick to your schedule, do what you say, be impeccable with your word. And it's not a numbers game, it's a relationship game. And the relationships are built by people who buy into you. And now podcast gives them the ability to get to know you without really knowing you. And then I ask my guests, like, how did you find me? He's like, well, I was a listener and you pitched, like, come on my show. And I said, it's really interesting. You give that, like, personal kind of invitation and the floodgates open. I like agencies and like that, but I like people who are still betting on themselves every day. And that's what a podcast is. So appreciate you.
No question. No question. And listen, I love doing it. That's the other piece, right? Like, I can sit down whether I'm being interviewed on a show like this or whether I'm doing my own podcast. For me to sit down and interview somebody, I love it. And then I have an amazing team around me that edits it and puts it out and even creates, the collateral content around it and all that kind of stuff. So I get to do what I love, which is another thing that's, huge for me in business. I believe in highest and best use. You should do things you're great at, that you love, and that are highly leveraged and make a difference. And if you only get to do those things, then your business life is phenomenal.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it. There's so many cool things that I like come to mind just talking to you. I mean, I love the fact that baseball, I can just instantly go back to, and you're like, yeah, I was at game 6. I watched that happen. And I was like, man, I remember where I was at, game 6, I was walking through the hallway, anticipating that tonight I got to watch. I was living in Santa Cruz. I was living with my father. I'm going to date myself, but I was in junior high. And I remember I'm like, oh my gosh, tonight's that game, right? I never would have imagined. And when you think about that moment, being at the game and using that as a moment to remember, like, I was at that game, I watched that happen. Business is a lot like that. Like, you've seen a lot happen over your career. Would you mind sharing kind of a moment where you realized you're like, I'm really good at this? Like, when you go to become an attorney, for example, you got to have something inside of you. You're like, I'm actually good at this. Was there something that early on in your life that played a role into helping kind of shape that path specifically for you?
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think that one thing that comes to mind is when I first started my own firm, which was 6 years out of school, which is relatively early. I did not have a book of business because when you work in big law firms, they don't encourage you to develop your own business. They want you to be available for the partners, right? And then it's funny because then in order to make partner, you need to have business, but they discourage you from developing it. That's a whole comment on big law, but whatever. But the point was that I left the firm I was at in end of 91, beginning of 92, which was a recession, if anybody remembers. What lawyers were getting laid off all over the place. People tell me I was crazy. I had no clients. All right. I was just done, though. I needed to do something, on my own. And I launched it, paying my rent on credit cards. I ended up $115,000, $120,000 in debt by the time I started making money, right? I went from a 6-figure salary, to netting $17,000 my first year. But to answer your question, I think one of the biggest things that had me be successful back then and told me, hey, I could do this, was that I sort of created this rule, which was very uncomfortable in the beginning, but ended up working out. And that was that if somebody said, can you do this for me? I didn't need to know how to do it when I said yes. But the integrity in it was I needed to be confident that I could figure it out and do it well by the time I had to get it done, right? So if somebody was going to hire me today and, they need something in 2 weeks, if I was confident I can figure it out by then, I would say yes. Whereas a lot of folks won't do that, right? They're going to stay in their comfort zone, only what they know. So the ability to take that risk, the ability to bet on myself, right? And the ability to say, hey, I'm going to go figure this out. And the ability to say, if there's something that actually, and I was really honest about it. If I couldn't figure it out in time, I'd say no. So I wasn't desperate. I wasn't taking business I shouldn't. I wasn't misserving people. I wasn't going to mess up my reputation. But at the same time, I wasn't only going to bank on what I knew how to do at that time, because in the beginning, I was doing a lot of stuff that I hadn't done before. Now, after like a year and a half, it sort of came back into the stuff I love to do because I was able to get there. But in the beginning, I was running out of credit line. So I had to make some money, so.
120, 150 in credit card, that's not fun compounding interest, but you made it. Huge lesson in there too for any of you guys listening right now. If you zeroed in on it, once again, he bet on himself. He saw the opportunity, because the book of business that he wanted to create, it wasn't really said, hey, you shouldn't go do this. It was kind of frowned upon. Yep. Once again, when you bet on yourself and you begin to do what you want, and as I'm talking to you, the listener right now, Corey said in the very beginning something really, really basic. What's your definition of success? It's freedom to do what you want with who you want, when you want, right? You've heard that so many thousands of times. But that's the guest that I'm bringing to you. So think about it today. In the lane you're driving right now in your life, are you headed towards the thing that you've dreamt about, or are you driving somebody else's vehicle going to where they want you to go? You have the opportunity. You get one life. You're not a cat. So remember that as we kind of keep listening this theme today. It's really straightforward. In a day and age when business cards are handed out, Corey decided to write the book. The book was there because his wife nudged him. And he goes, oh, yeah, I need to do this. And then he said, I needed to do it my way versus the way all the other books had been written. And he gave 2 prime examples. So I want, as you get ready to kind of go about your day and your life and your week, think about where you're at as a listener in life. Who are you taking advice from? Somebody who's got 30 years of experience or somebody who's new and trying to just figure it out as they go? Corey has a plan, and that plan was stated, and you can learn more about it today. Go to Corey's website, right? CoreyKupfer.com. You go there, DealQuest podcast, learn about it, the law firm. You're going to learn about everything that Corey dropped today and so much more. The goal for you is like deodorant. Put it on daily and you won't stink. And if you forget it, remember to buy it and get it on as fast as possible. Inspiration only lasts for a while, but if you can build consistency in your life, you can share a story like Corey's, over 30 years experience in the game. Thank you, Corey, for dropping by the show today. It was awesome to have you. Simple, straightforward stuff, applicable to anybody listening. Doesn't matter what industry you're in. Thank you, Corey, for being a guest.
Tony, it's great to be here and great to connect.
All right. That's Corey. My name's Tony. And until next time, no matter where you go, no matter what you do, choose to make today the absolute best day of your life.
Thanks for listening to today's show. But before you go, let me ask you a question. How would you like to be the architect of your journey in this game we call life? Take the next step now at www.tonygrebmeyer.com. Enter your details to get the first week of the Be Fulfilled Journal for free. It includes access to our private community of thousands of other entrepreneurs. It'll give you more clarity and freedom in your day, and it might just change your life forever.